In this video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the math, astrodynamics, and software engineering required to calculate interplanetary trajectories with gravity assists. Gravity assists, planetary flybys, gravitational slingshots are all names that we give to this physical phenomena that enables us to use the planets in our solar system to rotate and increase the magnitude of our spacecraft velocity vectors to, in turn, explore more planets in our solar system. And this allows us to replace the mass of the spacecraft that would be fuel with more scientific instruments to learn more about our planetary neighbors. And not only do gravity assists allow us to explore our solar system, they also enable us to leave it and explore deeper into our universe, as we have done with the Voyager spacecrafts and one day with humans on board. This video will be broken down into 3 different sections. First, we'll start with the fundamentals of orbital mechanics, which is why orbits are conic sections in the two-body problem, building up all the way to what happens in a gravity assist event. Section 2 will cover the intuition behind how increases in the spacecraft velocity vector magnitude are possible given that energy and angular momentum are conserved in a closed system. And finally, Section 3 will be going over how to calculate gravity assist trajectories using Lambert solvers, root solvers, and its implementation in Python. So let's start by defining the underlying assumptions behind the most fundamental problem in orbital mechanics, which is a two-body problem. First, we assume that all that exists in the universe are two bodies. One is very large like the Earth, and the other is small like a satellite orbiting the Earth. We also assume that the large body, Earth in this case, is spherical and its mass is evenly distributed. If the body is spherical and the mass is evenly distributed, the center of mass will be at the geometric center, which means that we can assume that the force due to gravity from Earth is coming from the geometric center of the Earth. We must also assume that the small body does not gravitationally influence the large body. And this is a really good assumption because the pull of something so small like a spacecraft is not going to influence the orbit of an object so massive like the Earth. And lastly, we'll be using an inertial reference frame centered at the geometric center of the large body. And even though these are a lot of assumptions and this may seem too restrictive, you can still do a lot of very useful analysis with the results coming out of these assumptions. And these assumptions lead to the differential equation at the bottom, which is used to calculate the acceleration of a spacecraft given some position vector. But the derivation of this equation is outside the scope of this video, but the most important concept to get from this equation is that the acceleration of the spacecraft is a 1 over r squared relationship, which leads to conic sections for orbits. The result of the two-body assumptions is that all orbits are conic sections, which are circles, ellipses, parabolas, and hyperbolas. Another result is that since gravity is a conservative force, and it's the only force acting on the spacecraft, the mechanical energy and angular momentum of the orbit are constant. And in this case, we actually mean specific mechanical energy and specific angular momentum, since we are disregarding the mass of the spacecraft. Specific mechanical energy is defined as the magnitude of the velocity vector squared divided by 2 minus mu over the magnitude of the position vector, giving us units of kilometers squared per second squared, where this mu value is equal to the gravitational constant of our universe times the mass of the large body. And note that this value is proportional to the semi-major axis of the orbit, which here we can think of as a measure of how large an orbit is. Specific angular momentum is defined as a cross product between the position and velocity vectors with units of kilometers squared per second. And for a quick reminder, a cross product is a measure of how perpendicular two vectors are from each other. So the magnitude of the specific angular momentum is equal to the magnitude of the two vectors times the sine of the angle between them. Now, if we focus in on the green elliptical orbit, the plot on the bottom right shows us a way to visualize the relationships between position, velocity, energy, and angular momentum. The top portion of the plot is showing the position of the elliptical orbit with respect to time, and the bottom is the velocity. And we can see an inverse relationship between the magnitude of position and velocity, the lines in the purple. So this means that when position is at its minimum, velocity is at its maximum, and vice versa, which keeps the mechanical energy and the angular momentum constant. So now let's take a look at what happens to a spacecraft during a planetary flyby. We'll be using the Voyager 2 flyby of Jupiter to illustrate gravity assists. The first thing to note is that planetary flybys are hyperbolic orbits with respect to the planet that they are flying by. Again, since energy is conserved, the magnitude of the velocity of Voyager 2 before it flies by Jupiter and after is constant with respect to Jupiter, but the vector is rotated. The before and after velocity vectors are represented by the purple arrows on the plot on the bottom right, and the plot on the left shows the components of the magnitude of the velocity vector as Voyager 2 flies by Jupiter. We can see that the magnitude is equal before and after, with a large spike as the spacecraft approaches Jupiter. And we can see that the vector has rotated, since before the flyby, most of the motion was in the y-axis, and then after, most of the motion is in the x-axis. We've established that a planetary flyby rotates a velocity vector, but does not change its magnitude with respect to the planet. Pure rotations of velocity vectors do change the angular momentum of the spacecraft, but they don't change the specific mechanical energy. The plot on the right is an example of what a pure rotation of a velocity vector looks like. The two orbits share a common position vector, which is a red arrow, but their velocity vectors are rotated by 30 degrees. Since the angular momentum depends on the angle between the position and velocity vectors, this rotation does in fact change the angular momentum and also changes the eccentricity of the orbit. However, this does not change the specific mechanical energy because that is only a function of the magnitude of the vectors. Therefore, these two orbits have the same semi-major axis. From this, we can conclude that we need an increase in the velocity magnitude with respect to the Sun in order for spacecraft like the Voyagers to reach the outer planets. But how then is an increase in velocity magnitude possible given the results from the two-body problem? The answer to this comes from the fact that the two-body dynamics analysis assumes that all that exists in the universe are two bodies and that the central body is stationary with respect to the inertial frame, where in reality the planets are in orbit around the Sun and therefore have velocity vectors themselves. So as we've already established, on the right we see what Voyager 2's flyby of Jupiter looks like with respect to Jupiter, which has an incoming and outgoing velocity vectors that are equal in magnitude but rotated from each other. And on the left, we see Voyager 2 and Jupiter's trajectories with respect to the Sun, which don't have equal magnitude. The velocity vector after the flyby has greater magnitude than before. And in order to reconcile this, we need to account for Jupiter's velocity vector with respect to the Sun. First of all, we already know that the spacecraft velocity vector will be rotated. In this case, the spacecraft velocity vector is rotated towards Jupiter's velocity vector. We also know that the magnitude of the spacecraft velocity vector with respect to Jupiter's velocity vector must be equal before and after the flyby. So if we take a look at the vector diagram on the bottom left, we can observe that if we only rotated this v_arrive vector without changing its magnitude, the difference between the relative velocity vector of the spacecraft departing Jupiter would be smaller than what it arrived with. This is simply the distance between the tips of the vectors. Therefore, the only way that we can keep the magnitude of those differences equal is to increase the magnitude of the spacecraft departing velocity vector. And this is the secret sauce behind gravity assist. We can use the velocity of the planet itself to increase the spacecraft velocity with respect to the Sun. Also, the larger the planet, like Jupiter, the more velocity vector can be rotated, thus the larger the increase in the magnitude that the velocity vector can have. And this is why Jupiter is a great planet to do a flyby around, since its orbit is in between Earth and the outer planets, and it's so massive. So now that we have the intuition behind how gravity assists work, we can move on to how to apply the math behind astrodynamics into software to calculate these trajectories. So first, we'll start by stating the zero sphere of influence assumption, and this means that we are going to be modeling the flybys as instantaneous changes to our velocity vector. So before the flyby, we have some position and velocity, and after the flyby, we have the same position, but a new velocity vector. And this is a good assumption for first order analysis because the amount of time that a spacecraft spends inside the sphere of influence of flyby planets is very small, a few days, with respect to the entire trajectory, which is years. And therefore, the full trajectory will be modeled as heliocentric elliptical orbits patched at each flyby. This is also referred to as patch conics. The most important component of solving this problem is a Lambert solver. Lambert's problem states that if you have two position vectors and an amount of time in between them and assume two-body dynamics, you can calculate the velocity vectors at those two position vectors. And this is a boundary value problem because we need to calculate the velocity vectors at the initial and final times, which are the boundaries. In our case, the two position vectors are going to be the positions of the planets at certain times. These two plots represent two examples of Earth to Mars trajectories where we can predict where the two planets are going to be at two separate times, and from that we can calculate the trajectory of a spacecraft going from Earth to Mars. And this is just stating Lambert's problem. There are a number of different Lambert solvers out there, and in this case we'll be using a Lambert solver that uses a shooting method. And also, since we know the position and velocity vectors of the planets, and we are calculating the velocity vectors of the spacecraft, we can take the difference between those velocity vectors to calculate the v-infinity vectors at each planet. We'll be calculating the positions and velocities of the planets courtesy of JPL that publishes SPICE kernels containing this data. And if you're not familiar with SPICE, it's no big deal. All you need to know is that JPL publishes this data in a specific format where the files are structured such that they contain specific data points of position and velocities of the planets over time. And if you want to calculate the state vector in between those points, the SPICE system uses Chebyshev polynomials to interpolate between the points and outputs the state vectors. Now with all this information, we can set up the v-infinity matching problem, and we'll be using an Earth-Venus-Mars-Earth trajectory to illustrate this problem. So starting from Earth, we must define an amount of time that we want to take in order to get to Venus. And this is an initial condition to the problem that we are providing. This is not being solved for in this case. So given this initial trajectory from Earth to Venus, which is solved by a Lambert solver, we will have an incoming v-infinity vector at Venus. Along with this incoming v-infinity vector, we also know that the next planet we want to go to is Mars. And this is where Lambert's problem comes in again. The objective is to calculate a trajectory that will have equal incoming and outgoing v-infinity magnitudes with respect to Venus that will reach Mars. And in order to solve this, we will be iterating on top of a Lambert solver. Here we define a function that describes our objective, that we want Venus arrival and departing v-infinity vectors to have equal magnitude. Our input to this function is time of flight between Venus and Mars, and the output is a magnitude of the difference between the vectors. On the bottom right is a plot of what this function looks like with different time of flight values passed in. So given some initial guess of time that it will take to get from Venus to Mars, say 1 year, we can solve a Lambert's problem that will give us a trajectory between the planets. But this doesn't guarantee that those v-infinity vectors are going to be equal. So this is where a new shooting method comes in. Our objective equation is a scalar valued single variable function that we need to find the root of when the function is equal to 0. And this function is scalar valued because the output is a single number, and single variable because it only has one input, time of flight between Venus and Mars. In this case, we can solve this using a Newton's root solver. Newton root solvers require us to know the derivative of our function, and there are many cases where we either cannot or don't want to explicitly calculate the derivative of a function, and this is one of them. So instead, we can use a finite differences method to approximate the derivative of the function. And this is actually called a secant method, which evaluates the function at some time before and after the desired value to estimate the derivative. In our case, we could make these steps really small, like milliseconds, which is plenty enough for us to converge on a solution to the root. So for this Venus to Mars transfer, we see that the incoming and outgoing v-infinities are matched with a roughly 138-day transfer, and that's our solution to this problem. And then the next step is to take that incoming Mars v-infinity vector and repeat the same process for the next leg of the trajectory to get back to Earth.